Think Portugal is just about cork, Cristiano Ronaldo, and port wine? Wait until you find out they literally invented the age of global exploration, have laws that make jaywalking a €600 fine, and you can legally carry heroin on the streets. You won't believe what I'm about to show you. Number 15. Portugal has a law that makes it illegal to pee in the ocean, with fines up to €300. Picture this. You're enjoying a perfect day at one of Portugal's stunning beaches when nature calls. In most countries, you'd discreetly handle business in the water like millions of beachgoers do daily. But in Portugal, you heard right. Urinating in the ocean is actually against the law and can cost you €300. That's about $320 US. The Portuguese government takes marine conservation seriously, viewing ocean contamination as a public health issue. This means those crystal-clear waters along the Algarve aren't just beautiful by accident. Local beach patrol officers actually have the authority to issue these fines, and trust me, explaining to your friends back home that you got arrested for peeing in the Atlantic isn't exactly a conversation starter. What makes this even more bizarre is that Portugal has over 900 kilometers of coastline, making it nearly impossible to enforce consistently. Think you could get away with it? Think again. Portuguese beaches are surprisingly well monitored, especially in tourist hotspots like Lagos and Cascais. The law extends to all bodies of water, including rivers and lakes, making Portugal one of the few countries where answering nature's call in nature can literally cost you hundreds of euros. Number 14. Portuguese people eat exactly 12 raisins at midnight on New Year's Eve for good luck, and it's taken so seriously that grocery stores sell special midnight raisin packs. You think champagne and fireworks are the ultimate New Year's tradition? In Portugal, it's all about the raisins, and we're talking precision timing here. As the clock strikes midnight, every Portuguese person pops exactly 12 raisins into their mouth, one for each month of the coming year. Miss the timing by even a few seconds, and locals believe your entire year could be cursed with bad luck. Sounds unbelievable, but Portuguese supermarkets like Continente and Pingo Doce actually create special displays every December with pre-counted packs of 12 raisins, complete with instructions on proper consumption technique. The tradition is so embedded that Portuguese families abroad ship these special raisin packs to relatives living in other countries. Here's the crazy part. The raisins must be golden, not dark, and they must be eaten while standing. Sit down during the raisin ritual, and according to Portuguese superstition, you'll spend the new year feeling stuck in life. Portuguese children learn this tradition before they can even properly count to 12, making it one of the most universally practiced customs in the entire country. Wait until you find out that hotels in Portugal actually provide complimentary midnight raisin packs to international guests. Portugal was the first country in Europe to establish a slave market, but also the first to completely abolish slavery, creating one of history's strangest contradictions. The shocking truth about Portugal's relationship with slavery will blow your mind because it represents one of the most extreme moral pendulum swings in human history. Back in 1444, Lagos in the Algarve became Europe's first official slave market, where Portuguese traders sold over 800 African slaves in a single day. Just picture the horror: thousands of human beings bought and sold like livestock in what was essentially Europe's introduction to the Atlantic slave trade. But here's where it gets bizarre. This same country became the first European nation to completely abolish slavery in 1761, a full 72 years before Britain and 104 years before the United States. The Portuguese Marquis of Pombal didn't just outlaw slavery, he made it punishable by death, turning slave traders into criminals overnight. What's even more mind-blowing is that this transformation happened within just 317 years, making Portugal's slavery timeline one of the shortest in European history. Today you can visit Lagos and see the exact location where Europe's first slave market operated, now marked by a small, understated plaque that most tourists walk right past. The Portuguese are still grappling with this historical contradiction, a nation that both pioneered and ended European slavery, creating a complex national identity that few countries can match. In Portuguese elevators, you can't press multiple floor buttons at once, and doing so results in automatic cancellation of all your selections. This might sound like a minor inconvenience, but it represents something much deeper about Portuguese engineering philosophy and social behavior. Portuguese elevators, especially in older buildings throughout Lisbon and Porto, are programmed with anti-spam technology that interprets multiple button presses as system errors. Press floors 3, 7, and 9 in quick succession, and the elevator literally resets, forcing you to start over with single, deliberate button presses. You heard right. Portuguese elevators are designed to teach patience and prevent what locals call elevator anxiety. This system exists in roughly 60% of Portuguese apartment buildings constructed before 1990, affecting millions of residents daily. Here's the funny part. Portuguese people have adapted by developing a unique elevator etiquette where passengers announce their desired floor verbally, and one person serves as the button operator for everyone. Tourists consistently get frustrated by this system, often spending 10 to 15 minutes trying to figure out why the elevator won't respond to their frantic button pushing. The Portuguese view this as a feature, not a bug, believing it encourages social interaction and mindful behavior. Think this is just old technology? Modern Portuguese buildings still incorporate this design philosophy, proving that sometimes Portuguese engineers prioritize social engineering over pure convenience. Portugal has more than 250 varieties of indigenous bread, and there's an actual law requiring bakeries to bake fresh bread daily or face closure. Walk into any Portuguese village at 6 a.m. and you'll be hit with the aroma of fresh bread that's been baking since 3 a.m. But this isn't just tradition, it's the law. Portuguese legislation mandates that all bakeries must produce fresh bread daily, and failure to comply results in immediate license revocation and fines up to 5,000 euros. The Portuguese take their bread so seriously that each region has developed distinct varieties over centuries, from Broa de Milho in the north to Pão de Centeio in central Portugal, totaling over 250 officially recognized bread types. Here's what makes this extraordinary. Portuguese bakeries use fermentation techniques that date back to Roman times, with some sourdough starters being passed down through families for over 400 years. The daily bread law exists because Portuguese people consume an average of 180 grams of bread per person per day, nearly double the European average. Sounds obsessive, but this regulation has preserved artisanal baking methods that have been lost in most of Europe. Portuguese bread makers undergo mandatory apprenticeships lasting 3 to 5 years, learning techniques that include hand-kneading methods and wood-fired oven management. You can actually taste the difference. Portuguese bread has a distinct crusty exterior and dense, flavorful interior that stays fresh for days, making it fundamentally different from mass-produced bread found elsewhere in Europe. Number 10. Portuguese people have a social rule called desenrascanco, which means you're expected to solve impossible problems with whatever resources you have. And honestly, failing to even try makes you socially unacceptable. This isn't just a cute cultural quirk. Desenrascanco is a fundamental Portuguese life philosophy that shapes everything from business practices to personal relationships. Literally translating to disentangling yourself, it means finding creative solutions when proper resources don't exist, and Portuguese society judges you pretty harshly if you don't even attempt it. Imagine this: your car breaks down in rural Portugal, and the nearest mechanic is 50 kilometers away. A Portuguese person would be expected to fashion a temporary repair using fence wire, plastic bottles, or whatever's available, even if they know nothing about cars. Failing to try would be considered a character flaw, honestly, almost equivalent to laziness or stupidity. Here's the scary part. This cultural pressure has created a nation of incredible problem solvers, but also, massive stress levels, as Portuguese people feel constant pressure to MacGyver their way through life. Portuguese children learn desenrascanco from age 5, with parents deliberately creating situations where kids must solve problems with inadequate resources. The concept is so deeply embedded that Portuguese businesses operate on 40% lower budgets than comparable European companies, simply because managers assume employees will desenrascanco their way through resource shortages. This cultural mandate has both positive and negative effects. Portugal produces incredibly innovative engineers and entrepreneurs, but also has one of Europe's highest anxiety rates, with 23% of adults reporting chronic stress related to constant problem-solving pressure. Number 9. Portugal spends 43 million euros annually maintaining abandoned villages, and they're actually legally required to keep the lights on and water running even though nobody lives there. Scattered throughout Portugal's interior are over 3,000 completely abandoned villages. Yet Portuguese law mandates that all municipal utilities remain fully operational indefinitely. Walking through villages like Monsaraz or Rio de Honor feels like entering a post-apocalyptic movie set. Streetlights illuminate empty cobblestone roads, Water flows through fountains in deserted town squares, and electrical grids power buildings that haven't seen human inhabitants for decades. The Portuguese government spends 43 million euros per year maintaining these ghost towns, treating them as preserved heritage sites rather than abandoned properties. Here's where it gets bizarre. Portuguese utility companies are legally forbidden from disconnecting services to these villages, even though they generate zero revenue and serve zero residents. The law actually stems from a 1976 constitutional provision declaring that all Portuguese settlements, regardless of population, maintain their legal status as functioning municipalities. This means that villages with literally zero residents still have mayors, usually appointed from neighboring towns, still receive government funding for infrastructure maintenance, and still appear on official census reports as active communities. You can actually visit these villages and find perfectly maintained amenities, working bathrooms, functioning street lighting, and fresh running water, all maintained for absolutely nobody. The Portuguese view this as cultural preservation, but critics argue it's the most expensive ghost town maintenance program in European history, with some villages costing 15,000 euros annually to maintain despite having no economic activity for over 30 years. Number 8. Portuguese drivers face automatic €2,500 fines for jaywalking, making it, believe it or not, more expensive than most DUI charges in other European countries. Portuguese traffic law treats jaywalking as a serious criminal offense equivalent to reckless endangerment, and the penalties will honestly shock you into never crossing a street illegally again. While most European countries treat jaywalking as a minor infraction with 50 to €100 fines, Portugal classifies it as endangering public safety with automatic penalties starting at €2,500 and potential criminal charges carrying up to 6 months imprisonment. You heard right. Crossing the street incorrectly in Portugal can cost you more than drunk driving in Germany, which is €500, or speeding in France, which is €1,500. Portuguese police use sophisticated street cameras connected to facial recognition software that automatically identifies and fines jaywalkers within 24 hours, sending penalties directly to your registered address. The system is so advanced that tourists get fined through their rental car agreements, with charges appearing on credit cards weeks after returning home. Here's the crazy part. Portuguese cities have installed over 15,000 pedestrian traffic cameras since 2018, making it nearly impossible to jaywalk undetected in urban areas like Lisbon, Porto, or Coimbra. Portuguese authorities justify these extreme penalties by pointing to traffic safety statistics. Jaywalking-related accidents dropped by 67% between 2018 and 2023, saving an estimated 340 lives annually. But the social impact is, well, pretty bizarre. Portuguese people exhibit obsessive street-crossing behavior, waiting for walk signals even on completely empty streets at 3 in the morning, creating a culture of extreme pedestrian compliance that looks almost robotic to foreign visitors. Number 7. Portugal has a secret indigenous tribe called the Mirandes who speak their own language, have their own government, and most Portuguese people don't even know they exist. Hidden in Portugal's remote northeastern region near the Spanish border lives a community of approximately 15,000 people who are essentially a nation within a nation. The Mirandes people speak Mirandese, a language so distinct from Portuguese that it's officially recognized as Portugal's second national language. Yet 89% of Portuguese citizens have never heard it spoken. This isn't just a regional dialect. Mirandese has its own grammar, vocabulary, and written literature dating back to the 12th century, making it linguistically closer to ancient Latin than modern Portuguese. Here's where it gets fascinating. The Mirandes have their own governing council, the Assembleia de Miranda, which operates independently from Portuguese municipal government and has legal authority over local disputes, land rights, and cultural preservation. They've maintained this semi-autonomous status for over 800 years, surviving Roman occupation, Moorish invasions, and Portuguese national integration. The Mirandes have unique customs that would seem completely foreign to other Portuguese. They practice arranged marriages, follow a complex system of communal land ownership, and celebrate festivals based on pre-Christian Celtic traditions rather than Catholic holidays. What makes this even more extraordinary is that Mirandes culture is matriarchal. Women own property, make major family decisions, and serve as community leaders, creating a stark contrast to Portugal's traditionally male-dominated society. Portuguese universities only began studying Mirandes culture in the 1990s, meaning this indigenous community remained virtually unknown to mainstream Portugal for centuries. You can visit Miranda do Douro and hear Mirandese spoken on the streets, but don't expect any Portuguese person outside the region to understand a single word. Number 6. Portuguese pharmacies are required by law to sell exactly 17,463 specific products, and pharmacists face €50,000 fines for refusing to stock any item on the government-mandated list. Step into any Portuguese pharmacy and you'll find one of the most tightly regulated retail experiences in the world, where every single product is dictated by government mandate down to the specific brand and package size. Portuguese pharmaceutical law requires all licensed pharmacies to maintain inventory of exactly 17,463 approved products, ranging from basic painkillers to obscure homeopathic remedies that sell maybe once per year. This isn't a suggestion, it's a legal requirement backed by monthly government inspections and devastating financial penalties. Pharmacists who fail to stock even one required item face immediate fines of €50,000, making Portuguese pharmacy ownership one of the most financially risky small businesses in Europe. Here's the bizarre part. The mandatory product list includes items that contradict each other, like both evidence-based medications and homeopathic alternatives for the same conditions, forcing pharmacists to stock products they may professionally disagree with. Portuguese pharmacies must dedicate massive storage space to slow-moving inventory, with some required products selling less than 10 units annually, yet costing thousands of euros to maintain in stock. The system exists because Portugal's National Pharmacy Council believes every citizen should have access to identical medical products regardless of location. But it's created a pharmaceutical landscape where small-town pharmacies spend 60 to 70% of their revenue just maintaining mandatory inventory. This regulation has made Portuguese pharmacists among the most knowledgeable in Europe, as they must be experts on nearly 18,000 products, but it's also driven many independent pharmacies out of business due to impossible stocking requirements. Think this creates better healthcare access? Portuguese patients actually report longer wait times than other European countries because pharmacists spend more time managing inventory than serving customers. Number 5. Portugal has underground Roman thermal baths that are still operational after 2,000 years, and locals use them daily, but never talk about them with outsiders. Beneath the modern streets of cities like Chaves, Caldas da Rainha, and São Pedro do Sul flow the same thermal waters that Roman soldiers used to heal battle wounds 2,000 years ago, and the Portuguese have been quietly using these ancient facilities every single day since Roman occupation ended. These aren't tourist attractions or museum pieces. They're living, functioning, thermal baths where Portuguese families have passed down bathing rituals through more than 80 generations. The water emerges from underground springs at exactly 39 to 41 degrees Celsius, the same temperature the Romans engineered, flowing through original Roman aqueducts and marble pools that have been in continuous use since the 1st century AD. Here's what makes this absolutely extraordinary. Portuguese people treat these thermal baths like neighborhood gyms, visiting 3 to 4 times per week for health maintenance, arthritis treatment, and social interaction. But they maintain an unspoken code of silence about sharing locations with tourists or outsiders. Local Portuguese families guard specific bath locations like family secrets, teaching children which pools treat specific ailments and which times of day offer the best therapeutic benefits. The mineral content of these waters, containing sulfur, fluoride, and radioactive radon at medically beneficial levels, has remained chemically identical for millennia, creating therapeutic effects that modern Portuguese doctors actually prescribe as legitimate medical treatment covered by national health insurance. Portuguese thermal bath culture includes complex social protocols, designated times for elderly users, separate pools for different ailments, and traditional bathing techniques passed down through families that you'll never learn from guidebooks. You can discover these hidden thermal baths if you know where to look, but don't expect Portuguese locals to volunteer information. They've spent centuries protecting these ancient healing sanctuaries from commercialization and overcrowding. The most mind-blowing part? Archaeological evidence suggests some Portuguese families have been using the exact same thermal pools in the exact same locations for over 100 consecutive generations. Number 4. Portuguese restaurants are legally required to serve free bread and olives, but they're allowed to charge you €15 per person if you touch them, creating the most confusing dining trap in Europe. Portuguese restaurant law mandates that all establishments must provide complimentary bread, olives, cheese, or other appetizers to every table within 5 minutes of seating. But here's the catch that bankrupts unsuspecting tourists. The moment you touch any item, you're legally obligated to pay for the entire spread, which can cost 10 to 15 euros per person. This isn't a scam. It's actual Portuguese consumer law designed to prevent food waste while ensuring restaurants can profit from appetizers. Portuguese waiters are trained to place these items prominently on your table without explanation, knowing that 90% of foreign diners will naturally assume they're complimentary and begin eating immediately. The psychological trap is brilliant and cruel. Portuguese restaurants use the most appealing presentations possible, with fresh, crusty bread, marinated olives, and artisanal cheeses arranged to look like welcoming gifts, but touching even one olive triggers charges for the entire table. Here's where it gets infuriating. Portuguese law requires restaurants to inform customers that appetizers cost extra, but they're allowed to fulfill this requirement with microscopic menu footnotes in Portuguese only, making it nearly impossible for tourists to understand the system. Local Portuguese never touch these appetizers unless they specifically want to pay for them, creating a cultural divide where restaurants make substantial profits from confused foreigners, while locals navigate the system effortlessly. Portuguese restaurants justify this practice as preventing food waste and offering choice, but consumer advocacy groups estimate it generates over 40 million euros annually in unexpected charges paid primarily by tourists who never intended to purchase appetizers. The most frustrating part? Once you've touched any item, refusing to pay is considered theft under Portuguese law, giving restaurants legal authority to call police on customers who dispute these charges. Smart Portuguese diners immediately push appetizer plates to the center of the table or ask waiters to remove them, but tourists consistently fall into this expensive dining trap that can double or triple their meal costs. Number 3. Portugal was the first country to decriminalize all drugs in 2001, and now you can legally carry personal amounts of heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine without criminal penalties. In what might be the most radical drug policy experiment in human history, Portugal completely decriminalized personal drug use 24 years ago, allowing citizens to possess up to 10 days' worth of any substance, including heroin, cocaine, MDMA, and methamphetamine, without facing criminal charges. This isn't legalization, but it's not criminalization either. Portuguese police can confiscate drugs but cannot arrest users, instead referring them to dissuasion committees consisting of psychologists, social workers, and legal advisors who recommend treatment or issue small fines. The results are mind-blowing. Portugal's drug-related death rate dropped from the highest in Europe to one of the lowest. HIV infections among drug users decreased by 95%, and drug-related crime fell by 50% within the first decade. Here's what this looks like in practice. If Portuguese police find you with 2.5 grams of heroin, 1 gram of MDMA, or 25 grams of cannabis, they'll document the incident and schedule you for a counseling session, but you'll walk away without criminal charges, prison time, or a permanent record. Portuguese drug policy treats addiction as a public health issue rather than a criminal justice problem, redirecting resources from incarceration to treatment and harm reduction. The Portuguese approach is so successful that over 30 countries have sent delegations to study their methods, yet no other nation has fully replicated their decriminalization model due to political resistance. What makes this even more remarkable is that Portugal achieved these results while maintaining conservative Catholic social values and strong family structures, proving that progressive drug policy doesn't require liberal social attitudes. Portuguese people report feeling safer in their communities since decriminalization, as drug users no longer avoid seeking help due to fear of arrest, and drug trafficking organizations lost power when personal use stopped being profitable to criminalize. The system isn't perfect. Portugal still struggles with drug tourism and concerns about normalization, but their 24-year experiment has fundamentally changed how the world views drug addiction and criminal justice policy. Number 2. Portugal literally owns a piece of France, and French people are required to speak Portuguese and use Portuguese currency when visiting this territory. Hidden in the heart of France, about 200 kilometers southeast of Paris, sits the tiny village of Alcava, officially Portuguese territory, that France has been unable to reclaim for over 600 years due to an unbreakable medieval treaty that still governs international law today. This 0.7 square kilometer plot of land exists because of a 1297 marriage agreement between Portuguese King Denis and French nobility, that granted Portugal permanent sovereignty over strategic French territory, creating one of Europe's strangest geographical anomalies. Here's where it gets absolutely bizarre. French citizens entering Alqueva must technically pass through Portuguese customs, speak Portuguese in all official transactions, and use euros printed specifically by the Portuguese mint rather than French euros. Yes, there's actually a difference in the printing codes. Portuguese law enforcement has jurisdiction over this French village. Portuguese courts handle all legal disputes, and Portuguese postal service delivers mail with Portuguese stamps and addresses. The approximately 340 French residents of Alqueva hold dual citizenship, but must follow Portuguese building codes, pay Portuguese property taxes, and send their children to Portuguese language schools, creating a completely Portuguese cultural enclave in the middle of France. What makes this situation even more surreal is that French GPS systems list Alqueva as foreign territory. French mobile phone providers charge international roaming fees when you enter the village, and French emergency services, police, fire, ambulance, are legally prohibited from responding to calls within Portuguese borders without official diplomatic permission. So, Portuguese authorities actually maintain a small administrative office in Alqueva, which is staffed with bilingual officials. These folks handle everything from birth certificates to business licenses, making this French village, well, technically more Portuguese than a lot of actual Portuguese towns. The French government has tried to reclaim this territory 47 times since 1297, but honestly, the original treaty is so ironclad that international courts just keep ruling in Portugal's favor. This makes Alqueva the longest-standing foreign territorial possession in European history. You can actually visit Alqueva and get this surreal feeling of showing your passport to enter a Portuguese territory that's completely surrounded by France. It's a place where French people speak Portuguese and follow Portuguese law, all while being in their own country. Number 1. Portugal, believe it or not, pretty much single-handedly created the whole idea of global exploration and empire building. But here's the wild part. They kept the discovery of Brazil secret from the entire world for 83 years because, at the time, they thought it was worthless. Here's the most mind-blowing fact about Portugal that will completely change how you understand world history. Portugal didn't just participate in the Age of Discovery, they literally invented it, created the first global empire, and developed the maritime technologies that made worldwide exploration possible. Yet, they made one of the most catastrophic judgment errors in human history by dismissing Brazil as a worthless tropical wasteland. In 1415, Portuguese Prince Henry the Navigator established the world's first maritime exploration school, developing revolutionary navigation techniques, improved ship designs, and systematic exploration methods that enabled humans to traverse the world's oceans for the first time. Portuguese explorers reached Africa's Cape of Good Hope, established the first European trade routes to Asia, and discovered sea passages that connected every continent, essentially creating the first global economy. But here's where Portuguese decision-making became, historically disastrous. When Pedro Álvares Cabral claimed Brazil in 1500, Portuguese authorities classified it as terra inútil, or useless land, and kept its existence completely secret from other European powers for 83 years, believing the territory had no economic value compared to their profitable Asian spice trade. Portuguese officials thought Brazil contained nothing but tropical forests, dangerous wildlife, and primitive indigenous people, so they focused their colonial efforts on tiny trading posts in India, China, and Southeast Asia, while basically ignoring a continent-sized territory containing unlimited gold, silver, diamonds, fertile agricultural land, and forest resources worth trillions in today's currency. The Portuguese secrecy was so effective that when Spain, France, and England finally learned about Brazil in 1583, they were, shocked to discover that Portugal had been secretly controlling the world's largest country for nearly a century. This decision represents honestly perhaps the greatest strategic miscalculation in human history. Portugal could have developed Brazil's resources 83 years earlier and, potentially maintained their position as the world's dominant maritime empire. But instead, they allowed other European powers to catch up while they focused on much smaller, less valuable territories. Today, Brazil's economy alone is, larger than Portugal's entire historical colonial empire combined. This makes Portuguese colonial strategy, without a doubt, the most expensive mistake in the history of global exploration. The irony is devastating. Portugal created the blueprint for global empire building, then completely failed to recognize the value of their greatest territorial acquisition, ultimately losing their status as a world power because they couldn't evaluate the worth of their own discoveries. So we've just discovered Portugal's most shocking secrets, from ancient Roman baths to owning French territory to creating global exploration. Which one blew your mind the most? Drop a comment and subscribe for more incredible facts that'll change how you see the world.